Everyone. May I request people at the back to please sit? We'll be shortly beginning the session. Good morning, delegates. I warmly welcome you all to the session, Reimagining Sustainability over the next decade. As we navigate an era shaped by shifting global dynamics and intensifying climate events, industries across the world are feeling these impacts. The deliberations in this session will include the evolving meaning of sustainability, not as a compromise to economic growth or resilience, but as the very foundation for addressing these pressing global challenges. To commence the session, we warmly invite Mr. Jayant Acharya, Mr. Peter Barker, and Mr. Shiv Kumar S. to the dais. I would now like to hand over to Mr. Barker to provide the context for this session and take the discussion forward.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming. For a small second, we thought we would be speaking to the three of us, but thank you for joining. It's fantastic to be here. Let me first, obviously, thank CII for the invitation and the ITC Center for Excellence in Sustainability, and congratulations on your 20th anniversary. I think I myself came here for the first time 12 years ago, for the last time about 6 years ago, just before COVID, I think. And I am already inspired. Only one session into the event, and I've learned a lot. As we all know, the world is a pretty complex place at this point in time. Sanjeev said it very well this morning. Turn is the new word. He had a whole abbreviation for it. But the way the world turns is probably not as many of us had predicted only a few years ago. So geopolitics, trade, tariffs, economic uncertainty, AI, putting a lot of topics on the agenda of boards of companies. And the conversation is no longer one global conversation. I fully respect that we are moved to this room because having the COP30 presidency in the House presenting their case to the audience is very important, because I think of COP30 as probably the ultimate test of multilateralism. Can we still, as global communities, come together to talk about the solutions for a global threat, being climate change? And so it's absolutely an imperative that we all bring our best efforts to COP30 to make that conversation go forward. But the conversation of sustainability is no longer the same in different parts in the world. Obviously, in America, with anti-woke and all the politics there, it's a difficult conversation to have. If I come out to Asia, it's a conversation about competitiveness, about moving forward. And that's why this first hour has already inspired me so much by showing how India, the Indian minister, but also Sanjeev as the leader here, giving the perspective of Indian business. Generally, what I meet in the world, and I should have said, of course, I'm with the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, so we talk with businesses around the world. The question on what is the business case for sustainability is a new question. I often say we are moving away from morality to materiality. Why does this matter? And so what my answer to that is, well, the value drivers of sustainability are clear. It will either make you perform better, it will grow you more sustainably, or it will give you credibility as a leading company. And so business leaders need to do three things, and I want to talk to both my colleagues here to see what their perspective on that is. The first one is we need to really get our arms around physical risk in supply chains. This is a fastly developing terrain that business leaders in the world are not always well prepared for. All of you will have made risk assessments of your own plants, your own assets, but what about your supply chains? Many of those are global, and many of them go to places that you might not even be aware of. So today, actually, WBCSD is launching the CEO Guide to Physical Risk Assessment in Supply Chains. On wbcsd.org, you can download all that. The second thing, though, is if you think about physical risk, you think about adaptation. We must do more in adaptation. But the reality is super simple. We cannot adapt to a world that is 3 degrees warmer. At that level of warming, adaptation won't work anymore. And that is why emissions reductions continue to be a crucial element of corporate strategies going forward. And then the third thing, if you work on physical risk or on emission reductions, you need to take a supply or a value chain view. It is no longer good enough to just think about your own business. You need to think about the value chain, and that means you need to educate yourself in collaboration. So I'm very happy to have Jayant Acharya from JSW Steel and Siva Kumar from ITC with me today, leading companies within India and beyond India, and doing some really deep work on integrating sustainability into their corporate strategies and into their performance. So let me turn to Siva Kumar. You know, ITC, you've been leading the pack when it comes to promoting farmer-centric sustainability, nature-positive approaches to it. So how do you think about climate risk, climate resilience, and how does ITC work to move from a, let's call it reactive, to a more proactive approach on that?
Thanks, Peter, for those opening remarks and setting the context. Now, when it comes to agriculture, the same aspects of the business case and the physical risks, two other words that we heard in the inaugural session become rather important. One is the aspect of inclusivity, you know, because we are dealing with millions of stakeholders like farmers at one end of the chain, and of course along the chain there are many other stakeholders. And therefore, how do we include the farmers in any conception we have about building resilience to climate change? The other is on the trusteeship, word that we also heard in the morning when it comes to environment, because in any case agriculture is a large user of freshwater resources and of course the soil, topsoil in particular, and many other natural resources. Now, in order to make a business case in this broader context and be proactive, we need to be both inclusive in case of agriculture as also play a role of trusteeship. And the way that ITC has approached this is being a steward of the whole ecosystem and not just limit within the boundaries of our organization. You talked about you need to take the larger value chain in the context. So therefore, whether it is the work on water, how do you steward, whether it is simple watershed for creating storage or managing the demand side of water for more efficient usage, or creating real-time data on weather changes for the farmers to be able to respond instantly, making use of the cutting-edge technologies, and creating and supporting different digital public infrastructure for getting water managed among all the stakeholders. So I think the core point is how do you play the role of a steward in order to integrate the actions on part of everybody is the way that one could really get in a sector like agriculture.
Thanks. Just a quick follow-up. I've been involved with a company in the agriculture business that has done a mapping of all the locations where they grow their crops. Weather models, climate models for each location, millions of scenarios were overturned. But as the temperatures go up, as water levels go down in droughts or floods or whatever the impacts may all be, the yield of those crops universally begins to shrink, which then translates into the prices of those commodities are going up, and the margins for businesses like yours will come under pressure. Is ITC doing similar analysis? Because in this particular company, more than 50% of EBITDA was at risk in a period of 5 years from now. So this is no longer end of the century model of scientists. This is P&L and balance sheet issues today. Is that also your experience?
Yeah, so I think very interesting work that we are doing. I talked about leveraging technology and getting farmers to respond. Is really, as part of IPCC work, governments and different agencies around the world have done various scenarios and weather forecasts all the way until 2100. Now, making use of various models and then trying to micro-regionalize the impact of weather forecasts, which model is giving the best forecast for a given location as far as wind is concerned, or temperature is concerned, or precipitation is concerned, and so on. And then juxtaposing that with the phenological stage of the crop. And then identifying what implication it will have on the yield or the quality for the crop, and therefore what are the toolkits that are required to manage that as the weather progresses at a short-term basis, as well as based on these longer-term trends. How do you create research briefs for appropriate varietal identification and so on? So therefore, work really got a lot more deeper in the last 4 or 5 years after the AI has started giving completely new capabilities in doing so. And therefore, on one side, we see that if you are building this kind of a resilience, it is helping farmers in protecting their yields, as also protecting margins of our own supply chains and ensuring that our brands are available to the consumers at one end. But as some parts of the world are not progressing as well in terms of their climate resilient action, it is also throwing up opportunities for India to look at where do we export. Because we do similar kind of work that I talked about in terms of weather forecast and contrasting with the phenological stages of the crop. For all the crops of interest for India, as to where are those kind of comparable countries where we need to do that work, because today it's not that difficult using the same models that are available under the IPCC. So in terms of, obviously the probability rates of 2060 and 2070 are only at 60-70% as opposed to 20, 30 and 40, which are more at 85-90% kind of rates. But one has to use those scenarios and create these toolkits and see opportunities for expanding exports also. So it's both resilience to manage risk that you're talking about for the larger ecosystem, as also looking at opportunities and ensuring the food, nutrition and energy security from agriculture source with world as a market. I think interesting work is happening on that count also, that we are partnering with several startups in helping us do this, and then with the farmers collectives on the ground through the ITC Mars model, so that we have a delivery mechanism also at the other end to ensure that small farmers are able to respond to these kind of challenges.
Well, Jayant, let me turn to you. I mean, Jayant, CEO of JSW Steel. Steel is, so important, both in the economy that we run, but also in the green transition. But it's also one of the hardest to abate or hardest to decarbonize sectors. So can you share some of your experience on how you have integrated this into your corporate strategy, into your products?
So good morning, everyone. Happy to be here, and Peter, welcome to India, and thank you for your opening remarks. So yeah, steel is a hard-to-abate sector. As we all know, the emissions are high compared to the contribution it makes to the GDP. But at the same time, it's the foundation of any country's economic growth. Now, whether we talk about, all of us touch steel every day. We don't realize it. But whether it's infrastructure, whether it's manufacturing, whether it's consumption, whether it's building climate resilient infrastructure itself, steel is the foundation. So therefore, there is a need for us to decouple the emission with the growth of the economy and growth of the steel industry. When we look at physical risks, you mentioned one of them, the physical risks are becoming more real. As we see today, water and heat. And there are two chronic types. Basically, you could have a water scarcity, or you could have excess water, or you could have a high level of heat, which we are seeing now more often. These do impact our operations. These do impact the health of the workers. It also impacts our overall supply chain. So what do we do to mitigate this? And there could be extreme weather events which can impact the operations at large. So on the water side, we have, just to give you an example, at one of our steel plants in the south of India, at Vijayanagar, which is the largest single steel plant location in the country, we have built a water storage system. We have multiple reservoirs, but this reservoir we have built to have a storage of 260 days of water of the running of that plant. It is an 800-acre man-made lake. And it will have, on top of that, we are now putting solar panels to see that we capture solar energy as well, and then feed that back into the plant. So, and then working with the communities around us, seeing that rain harvesting, watershed management initiatives, to see that the operations and the community is taken care of if there are any events of water. The other one is heat. Now, in a steel plant, it's natural that the heat, the temperatures are high. It can vary anywhere between 1200 to 1300 degrees by virtue of the furnaces where you operate. How do we handle this kind of temperature externally and internally? So while we are taking various measures to see that we train workers, we do not expose them to extreme heat conditions, we are trying to reduce the interface between the man and the machines. So the AI and the digital tools, we have now tried to automate as much as possible to see that certain functions which were erstwhile being done by a man is now done by robots. So that interface is reduced, and that is one thing which we are trying to incorporate across all our functions. And strategically train people, make sure that preventive cooling, natural air flows, air conditioning, etc. is taken care so that the workers are comfortable to the extent possible. From a mitigation point of view, I think the steel industry has taken various measures. We are trying to reduce our consumptions in every area. As the minister also rightly said, mindful consumption is very important. So energy efficiency, process efficiency is very critical for us. We are improving those. We are moving into energy transition. We're moving more into renewable energy. By 2030, JSW Steel has a goal to become, run the entire steel plants on renewable energy rather than fossil energy. And we are already on track to do that. We already have 1 gigawatt of renewable energy in place, 2.5 gigawatt in the process. And we would require about 10 gigawatts by the end of this decade to become totally renewable energy based steel plants. As we look at new technologies, we are looking at hydrogen, we are looking at CCUS. As they become more efficient and viable, we will adopt those as well as we go along.
Great. Before I do that, I'm told we have to wrap up the session. So before I do that, one of the big questions that I always hear in hard-to-abate sectors is, how do we get enough demand for the solutions that are in there? So how do you think about matching demand and supply for the radical solutions that the world needs?
So yeah, solutions, basically, one is it's always debate between sustainability and economic viability. So we are trying to create solutions which are economically viable as well as sustainable. In India, we feel renewable energy is one of them which makes a lot of commercial sense to incorporate. How do we reduce consumptions? All solutions on those areas. How do we reduce our primary consumption of raw materials, use less, be more mindful, improve efficiencies? We are also looking at now creating a green steel plant, if I may say so. There is still no definition of green steel, but low carbon emission steel from India. And based on natural gas and renewable energy, we would be able to supply steel, let's say, below 0.8 CO2 per ton of crude steel, which is much lower than what is by and large expected in the world. So we are trying to put forth those kind of solutions to the customers who may so require.
All right, well, I mean, you got a brilliant taster by two brilliant Indian companies. We have to wrap up the session because a minister is here to speak to us. So both gentlemen will be around for a bit. You can ask them any questions there. I apologize, we can't do it in the room, but over to the next session. And thank you very much, Siva Kumar and Jayant, for being here.
Thank you, speakers. With this, we come to the end of this session and thank the panelists for making this an insightful discussion. I request all the speakers to step forward for a group photograph. May I request Mr. Shivakumar? May I now request Mr. Peter Barker to hand over the token of gratitude to Mr. Shivakumar. Thank you. We request all the delegates to move towards Sovereign Hall for the upcoming special plenary session on competitive and sustainable pillars of India's trade transformation. This session will feature an address by Shri Piyush Goyal, Honorable Minister for Commerce and Industry, Government of India. Thank you.